Hi, everybody. We're just gonna wait a minute to let everyone filter into the Zoom. But thank you all so much for joining us. Thanks, everybody. We're gonna give another 30 seconds for folks to filter in. It looks like we're still getting a couple of participants joining us. Really appreciate everybody taking your time. I think it looks like it's stabilized. So why don't we get started? Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Berman. I'm the Assembly Member for Northern Santa Clara County, as well as a bit of Southern San Mateo County. And I want to thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to talk about a very niche and wonky issue, which is VTA governance. Last year, I started to explore possible reforms to VTA's governance structure. We shelved the effort last April and then restarted it again kind of late last year, earlier this year, and that's what brings us all here today. We can all agree that transit riders and drivers and VTA employees and Santa Clara County taxpayers all deserve a high functioning and transparent governance structure that facilitates countywide success. We can also all agree that current board members are working their hardest to try to provide the high quality oversight that VTA needs and deserves. My concern, which has been supported by 3 Santa Clara County grand jury reports over the last 20 years, is that the current board structure does not set board members up for success. During my meetings with almost every member of the VTA board, many of whom I consider friends, I found the board members to be dedicated public servants doing their best given the many demands they have for their time. I also found that nearly all of them agreed that there are flaws in the current governance structure. In our efforts to find a policy solution that works for our region, my team and I have met with current and former board members, transit riders, community organizations, transit experts and advocates, grand jury members, and VTA staff. We've met with city staff and city council members from across the county, and we've analyzed dozens of other similar boards across the United States and Canada. VTA's governance has been the subject of 3 civil grand jury reports over the last 17 years. I guess now over the last about 20 years. The 2019 civil grand jury noted that VTA's operating performance has continued to deteriorate over the last 10 years relative to its own historical performance and the performance of peer agencies across a wide variety of metrics, including fare box recovery, operating cost per passenger trip, and passenger trips per revenue hour. The 2019 grand jury reached a similar conclusion to the one reached in 2004, which is that VTA's governance structure is a root cause of the agency's performance. The grand jury instructed VTA to propose legislation to restructure the governing board, which is codified in state law. I introduced a proposal last year that generated a lot of conversation and feedback, both positive and negative. This year, we're starting with a fresh slate, and that's why I'm asking you for your ideas and feedback. I want to know what you think. I also want to recognize the important internal governance reform work the VTA board has done following the board's self-assessment, including efforts to boost engagement and attendance and deepen the orientation process for new board members. But there's more work to be done. Before I continue, I want to ask the audience the first of 3 poll questions that we have for tonight. So if we could launch the first poll question. The first poll question is, do you think the VTA board of directors should be made up of A, all local elected officials, which is the current makeup, B, a mix of local elected officials and community members, or C, all community members and no local elected officials? And so let's give everyone a minute to answer the poll question. Apparently the host and the panelists can't vote, so I won't be voting. And apologies to my other panelists. John, I saw you going up there trying to vote. All right, it's split. It's actually very split. So far we've got 30%, 20 people have participated. We've got 41 of you on here, maybe 35 minus the panelists. So keep voting. I don't, hopefully we haven't closed it out yet. But right now it says all local elected officials got about 30%, a mix of local elected officials and community members got 45%, all community members and no local elected officials got 25%. And maybe that's closed. So maybe for the future questions, we'll leave it up a little bit for a little bit longer. I have three broad goals that I would like to achieve with a reformed governance structure. First, create a board structure and selection process that prioritizes regional, system-wide thinking over parochial, politically driven decision-making. VTA's own 2021 board self-assessment reported that many board members expressed concerns that some significant decisions are made for political reasons and are not in the best interest or the best return on investment for the county as a whole. Second, I want to ensure relevant expertise is represented on the board and create increased consistency and reliability so that the board can provide the appropriate oversight that VTA needs. Lack of expertise and thus over-reliance on staff can make it difficult for VTA board members to provide the appropriate oversight that the role demands. And third, I want to increase transparency around the selection process, particularly for the small city representatives on the board, and ensure the necessary staff support. VTA's self-assessment also reported from their interviews with board members that board members themselves were concerned that, quote, cities or agencies often select a VTA representative based upon that individual's interest in higher elected office and not on their interest in or familiarity with transportation, end quote. I'm emphasizing the small city reps because as a former Palo Alto council member, I know how hard that job is. You're working full-time, dedicating at least 20 hours to your volunteer city council duties, and then you have approximately a dozen additional city and regional assignments. VTA is one of those additional assignments. Some small city reps somehow find the time to prioritize VTA and they come to the meetings fully prepared. Others just don't, and they aren't able to read and analyze the hundreds of pages of material before each VTA meeting, let alone then serve on the different VTA committees and other transit boards that they might get assigned to as a part of their VTA board member role. In addition, under the current system, small city reps only serve for 2 years. So as soon as you begin to understand the issues, you get replaced. The self-assessment noted that, quote, most board members caution that VTA presents a steep learning curve for most members and observe that some elected members never fully understand the complexities of VTA operations. So I've spoken enough. I want to pass it over to our introductory speakers. I also want to note we're recording this. We got a request earlier today, and so we're recording this and we'll make it available on my website for people who weren't able to join us tonight on a Wednesday night. After our three introductory panelists have spoken, we're going to take comments from the audience using the raise hand feature. And I also really want to encourage everyone to take our VTA governance survey, which my staff is sharing in the chat right now, and we'll share it kind of throughout the hour. Our first speaker is the current chair of the VTA Board of Directors and the vice mayor of the city of San Jose, Chappie Jones. And I want to thank Chappie for the multiple conversations that we've had and your openness to having this conversation. So Chappie, I want to kick it over to you.
Thank you, Mark. When Assemblymember Berman first approached me about his interest in bringing about reforms, addressing VTA's governance structure, I really encouraged him to first and foremost do extensive outreach to stakeholders. Understand that Assemblymember Berman has reached out to VTA board members, VTA management, and other key stakeholders. And I see several stakeholders who are here today to provide their input. As a longtime member of the VTA board and the current chair, I definitely understand VTA has its challenges. I'm not going to deny that. Beginning in 2019, we embarked on our own path of reevaluation and restructuring through the establishment of an ad hoc board enhancement committee. And that was thanks to Teresa O'Neill's leadership. And thank you, Teresa. I see you're here tonight to offer your perspective. We also procured an independent consultant to identify governance best practices and evaluate VTA's current governance structure. As a member of the board enhancement committee, we cumulatively spent literally hundreds of hours reviewing nearly 90 recommendations to address VTA's board engagement and effectiveness. What emerged was a number of potential solutions based on significant and robust analysis, best practices in the industry, and also lessons learned. In fact, VTA is currently in the process of evaluating and implementing several of our recommendations that came out of that ad hoc committee. I'm here today because I'm very open to additional ideas. I believe in pursuing an all of the above strategy to bring about meaningful change and improvements. I look forward to working with my counterparts in VTA to improve the functioning of the organization, hearing your input, and to considering potential policy changes at the state level. It will help make our organization and service even better. I want to again thank Assembly Member Berman for your leadership and continuing to consider input from stakeholders as you develop this proposed legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Jones, and thank you for your partnership on this effort. I really appreciate it. Before we move on to our next panelist, I want to ask everyone our second poll question. So we can launch the second poll question, which is, what do you think is the most important qualification that should be represented on the board of directors? And there's a list. For the poll, you can only choose one. In our survey that we have, you can choose multiple. But for the poll, choose the area of the qualification you think is most important. Isabel, let's leave it up for about a minute to let people have a chance to reply. Thanks so much. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us tonight. When we talked about doing this, we weren't sure if we'd get anybody to show up. So having 43 people joining us is really appreciate everybody's participation. All right, hopefully everyone's had a chance to answer. Let's do 5 more seconds. Oh, so much for 5 more seconds. I think we're getting the answer. All right, transportation which makes sense, is the top one. Second place is executive management, third place infrastructure and construction management, and then 7% for a couple other areas. Very helpful. Thank you, everybody, very much. So we're gonna our next speaker is former VTA board member and former VTA chair Teresa O'Neill. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much to Assembly Member Mark Berman for convening this community meeting tonight and for showing great leadership in addressing this key issue of VTA governance. The success of VTA impacts everyone in Santa Clara County because transportation impacts us all. I firmly believe that VTA needs stronger leadership from a focused, dedicated board of directors to bring better transportation to us all. I have a story I tell about the first board meeting that I was to run as the new chair of the board. For my first meeting as VTA chair, I worked with the staff to place board members on the many VTA committees. When I arrived for the meeting, I started hearing which of the sitting board members had been removed from VTA by their mayors. These included board members who were going to chair committees. One of the mayors, who had no experience with VTA or transportation programs, put himself on the board as he was planning to run for another office that year. Later that year, he resigned from the VTA and put the prior member back on the board. A couple other board members got text messages during the meeting saying they were being unappointed. One leaned over and said to me, "So long, it's been great to work with you," as he started to pack up his things. I said to him, "Where are you going?" He showed me his phone with the text and said, "Home." I then said, "You can't leave now. I need you for closed session." as he was a strong voice and needed for quorum. I convinced him to stay for part of closed session, but others left. The story reflects an ongoing issue with the VTA board. I don't mean to be critical of the board members, but they are either full-time council members or county supervisors or part-time council members who usually have day jobs, and it is very challenging for them to give VTA the appropriate time and attention in either case. I doubt that any of the board members have VTA as their first priority. Efforts to stabilize board membership has not been very effective, so the problems are continuing. That is no way to run an agency as large and complicated as VTA. In Santa Clara County, at least before COVID-19, VTA had a larger combined budget than all of the other governmental entities except for the City of San Jose, County of Santa Clara, and the City of Santa Clara. VTA's financial model is different and just as complicated, if not more, than the municipal agencies. VTA isn't just buses and light rail. VTA also serves as the congestion management agency for our county, which makes it the lead agency for overseeing a wide range of transportation projects and receiving and distributing federal and state grants. And of course, we now have the relationship with BART, which entails managing some of the largest public works construction contracts in Bay Area history, as well as a complicated operating arrangement. I spent considerable time with VTA staff to resolve issues that had been lingering for years with BART. The most recent addition to the VTA portfolio is becoming a real estate developer. Over 20 pieces of VTA property are scheduled to be developed into a variety of types of housing and mixed uses. This makes VTA one of the biggest players in housing for the foreseeable future and will require guidance and oversight from the board. And I can't talk about VTA without talking about the dedicated VTA workforce. My heart broke when I heard about the tragic loss of VTA employees last May on a day we will never forget. That horrific event opened the door to the public learning of many other issues facing employees of VTA. I am sorry to admit that I didn't realize the scope of the problems. The VTA board has to be able to set policy to fix the problems and also help employees prepare for the future workplace in transportation. This isn't a problem to be feared, but a challenge to be embraced with effective leadership. And speaking of the future transportation, the most interesting and engaging VTA board meeting I participated in during my almost 5 years of attending was the special board workshop I convened on the future of transportation. The board all agreed that we needed to shift our focus to new transportation solutions and not get stuck in old ways that weren't working very well. But did we follow up on that? I have read articles referring to the plans and reports that VTA has currently that just need to be followed up on to solve problems. There are lots of them. How many board members have been given a list of them, read them, or had staff explain them? This is not a criticism, but an acknowledgement of the time required to gain understanding. When I was working with the consultants the board hired to look at our governance issues after the last grand jury report, we all agreed that VTA needed a true strategic plan to operate from. Has that been started in the subsequent years? Again, all of this is not meant to be critical of board members, management staff, or the employees. For me, it points out the limitation in our current structure. We have to stop being defensive and start going on the offensive to find real solutions. We can't continue to protect a system that is outdated and doesn't serve the real life people in our community. Santa Clara County has one of the most challenging environments for transportation in the United States, if not the world. But we also have incredible resources that we must use more effectively. That starts with a VTA board that is focused on achieving its incredibly important mission. I want to hear ideas about whether the board should be appointed or elected, but the board needs to be dedicated to building a VTA we can all feel proud of and served by. Thank you again to Assemblymember Berman and to the public for attending this evening.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you for your foresight and leadership on these governance issues from long before it was on my radar. So I really appreciate that. And before we get to the fourth of four speakers on our initial panel, I want to ask the last audience question. So if we launch poll question 3, which is, do you know how the VTA board members from your city or city grouping were selected? This one's simple, yes or no. So probably don't need as long time to answer this as the last question, but we'll keep it up for about 30 seconds. So do you know how if you, I guess whether you're from San Jose or from the small cities, do you know how they were selected? Hopefully no one's Googling the answer right now. No cheating. All right, Isabel, why don't we, that was a pretty simple one. Let's close that one out and see what the answer is. About split. I'm impressed. 43% said yes, they do know. Now, one question I should ask is how many of you are current or former board members? And that's how you know. And 57% said no, they don't know how their current board members were chosen. So Teresa alluded to the heroic workforce of VTA, and our last speaker is here to represent that workforce. Is John Courtney, president of the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 265. John, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Assemblymember Berman, and I want to thank you for tackling this issue. This is definitely not a popular issue, but you really you're responding to the grand jury reports that I really believe that the leadership of VTA and the board should have responded to a long time ago. And I really just wanted to express my appreciation for your efforts. And we're going to get to where you want to be. And I understand and I see your vision in a lot of ways. So if I can introduce myself, my name is John Courtney, president and business agent for ATU Local 265. I represent the over 1,500 workers at VTA, the bus drivers, mechanics, and other workers. And, you know, to the point that Ms. O'Neill was making in regards to doing reports and, you know, responding to these reports, and she's spot on. You know, this, I believe it's because the board members are so engaged in their community and the other work that they have because of the political world that we live in. They can't respond to these reports that are done, and they're probably really good information in these reports and perhaps a great path forward, but you don't have the time or the commitment to VTA to do that if you're a political person in this county, and this is your side job, if you will. So I do believe that a dedicated board is the best path forward. And you know, to that point, I don't know that that Assemblymember Berman's initiative here completely fixes the problem, but I definitely believe it's a really good puts us in the right direction for sure. I listening to Teresa's comments about how board members are appointed and then removed, and you know, in a lot of ways, it's good that we have board members who are politicians who may have used the VTA path on the board to become. Dave Cortese at one time was the chairman at Clara. And when I speak to those folks in regards to the agency or transportation in general throughout the state, I also represent the California Conference Board of ATU. They understand exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about public transportation. So that is a good thing. But I really believe that if you have a board member who is appointed by that politician, who is a public transportation advocate, citizen, or whatever, that individual who sits on the VTA board should be reporting back to the politician, and they can gain that education in that way and in that format. And I believe again, like I said prior, I think this is a good start. I really do have to talk about some of the stories that I've had with my engagement with current board members. I feel a lot of times like I'm educating folks on public transit. I've been in public transit for almost 30 years now. And I don't understand it all. Trust me, I don't pretend to. Then for me to have to start and, you know, really only have 3 hours on a Thursday night, the first Thursday of the month, to engage. And then there are some ad hoc committees, and to try to educate folks on the issues that are, you know, that pertain to public transportation. It's very frustrating at times. And, you know, board member Chappie, Chairman Chappie Jones, he's engaged, and he's one of the guys, and there are some very, very good people on the board. And that's not what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to, you know, throw the baby out with the wash water. What we're trying to do is find out a better path going forward. Some of the other transit agencies, I work with other presidents in ATU, they have all citizen boards. Some have a combination. Some of them have appointed. So there is no real good model here to follow. But again, I really want to say thank you to Assemblymember Berman for us having these conversations is a great beginning, and your initiative here is an absolute great start for the potential that we have in the Santa Clara Valley for good positive transit, robust transit. I mean, I can see it, and I hope that this is the beginning of of us all being able to realize an incredible transit system that we all deserve. So again, I want to say thank you, and thank you to the panelists, and of course the community has joined us this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, John, and please pass on my and all of our sincere thanks to your colleagues and your members, and the work that y'all are doing every day to help move us around. And that's to help our community run, literally. So really appreciate you, and appreciate you taking the time on your off time to chat with me about these things and to join us tonight. Really appreciate you and your engagement on this complicated issue.
Thank you.
Thanks. So thanks to John, Teresa, Chappie, Vice Mayor Jones. Really appreciate all three of you for kind of kicking off tonight's conversation. And now I want to hear from all of you. I really appreciate you being patient and hearing us kind of tee up this issue a little bit. If you'd like to speak, please use the raised hand feature on Zoom to enter the queue. And I'm going to call on folks, and when I call on you, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. You'll be given permission to unmute yourself. In order to give as many people a chance to speak as possible, I want to ask you to limit your comments to 1, maybe 2 minutes if necessary. If somebody already said something that you agree with, feel free to just say, hey, I agree with what somebody else already said. So I'm going to try to bring up the panelists and look for attendees. And I've got a couple of people starting to raise their hands. I'm going to start with Joe Kunstler. Joe, Isabel from my team should give you permission to unmute. And I'm going to be timing folks. Thank you, Joe, for joining us.
Thank you, Assemblyman. I'm counting on you to time me, but
I
a lot
gotcha.
of thoughts. But, I listened to the comments very carefully. I wonder what you mean by expertise, for one. You want to answer that, or you want me?
No, I want you to go ahead, and I'll maybe reply a little bit once you're done.
Okay, great. Because I just really, that to me sounds like a code word, and as a transit writer in multiple transits, it's very unsettling to hear that buzzwords like that thrown around instead of what you mean. Mm-hmm. I've interacted with a lot of transits as a transit advocate, and the model that I think is best for governing with the kind of campaign finance problems we have in this great country of America is a mayor's council. You directly elect the mayor. That hopefully next year Cindy Chavez, the heroic board member who helped save Caltrain and is up VTA, make sure she's still involved. But just really minding the issues of campaign finance, having directly elected mayors that that way when you vote for mayor, you're voting for transit board rep. If that's not possible, then let's look at direct elections, Assemblyman, and just do what we can to make sure that, say, Monica Mellon and a few other great transit advocates can get on the board, because having that ridership advocacy is so important, and not just having people, an in crowd that may or may not ride transit, because a lot of times, the ATU and other users and unions have to educate board members, and I really think that one of the two would be best. And with that, my thanks to the ATU for their hard work, and I want to hand the microphone to somebody else, Assemblyman. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it. So in regards to expertise, definitely not meant to be a code word. That just means certain people that have certain professional backgrounds. So should we have somebody on? And that's kind of the poll question that folks answered. Do we want people on there who have transportation background, infrastructure, project management background, kind of accounting, financial management background, different skill sets that together could create a board that is able to provide the high quality governance that we're hoping to accomplish. Appreciate that, Joe. Thank you. Next up, we have Mark. And Mark, I apologize. I'm going to go with Molyneux. But I apologize if I didn't get your last name right.
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, that's close enough. Yeah, Mark Molyneux, trans advocate here in Santa Clara County. But yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for speaking so far. And I'd like to echo, I think a lot of really good points were made. Earlier, Mark Berman was saying the problem, we have one problem is our system is too parochial, and absolutely. And I think it's worth coming to grips, the local control we have, all of our fragmented cities, all these veto points, this is in direct contradiction to a future we want of achieving goals for transit. And to be clear, our goals should be a higher mode share for transit users. And when I listen to VTA governance, I don't see enough of an eye on these goals being achieved going forward. So I would say I am not sold on elected versus appointed being a big goal here. To me, it's much more important. It's about regional versus local and parochial. If it was just the Board of Supervisors in their capacity also running VTA, I would not be unhappy with that. And if it was city-based appointees, I think that would be very problematic. So I think in general, I really appreciate the points being made. We don't want people who moonlight. We want people who take this seriously. People who just get along to get along. They're not moving trans in the right direction. But it's an unclear question how we don't make the due process opaque. In short, yeah, our future for transit is going to need a lot more regional action, not just within the county, but we have a lot of trouble moving around from county to county. Getting to San Mateo County is a mess. But we're going to need, I think, some changes here, and I'm really happy to see this energy.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate your comments. Next up, we have my former Palo Alto constituent, Penny Elson. Penny.
I'm unmuting. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, first, thanks for doing this, Mark. I think that the points Mr. Courtney made about the complexity of the issues related to transit and the time that it takes to learn this stuff is really important. As a citizen who has done some advocacy work with VTA, I've experienced that learning curve. It's very difficult. Small cities cannot do this without consistent representation. And sharing seats, I have to say, does not work. It does not enable these representatives from the smaller cities to have the time to learn and to be effective on the board. And also, during the times when a city doesn't have representation, stuff seems to move forward that works against you. So that's all very difficult. And I hope that's something we can resolve through this process that you're initiating. And then secondly, I just want to say that one of the things I think we might consider for trans representation is we might look at where the transportation activity is. At one point, when VTA was doing a sort of regional analysis of transportation activity, I saw a heat map that showed, where the intensity of trip activity was. And I think we might want to consider those maps in how we design. If, like, instead of just city lines, perhaps we should be looking at transportation activity as part of this decision-making process. So those are my thoughts. I'll wrap up. Sorry if I went too long.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you, Penny. And next we're going to go to John with no last name. John, go ahead and unmute yourself. It looks like you should have permission. John, did a little pop up to say that you're going to unmute yourself? All right, we're going to move on from John. We can come back to John if John wants to give it another go. Let's go to the next up is Eugene Bradley.
Hello, Assembly. Can everybody hear me?
We can, thank you.
All right, this is Eugene Bradley. I'm the founder and CEO of the Silicon Valley Transit Users Transportation Advocate Group that monitors VTA. Even though I personally live in Monterey County nowadays, I've monitored and advocated for VTA since 2001. So this is definitely a good step forward, Assembly Member. It's time for cool change when it comes to governance reform. I've met board members with whom the idea of just even the fact that I took a bus to a board meeting, they look at you like as if they wanted to put you in an asylum. That's just not the right attitude to have when you're managing a transit agency with at least a $500 million budget. I agree with all the speakers, all three of you, as well as the previous public speakers, in that there really needs to be just a mix, not just of politicians, but also transit advocates and even transportation experts, those who can read the staff reports that can number sometimes up to hundreds of pages and that need a lot of interpretation. It's tough when you are an elected official and you have to put your city constituents before an entire county, which makes really this whole parochial process just one broken cluster that it is. So it's time for cool change when it comes to VTA governance. So let's make it happen, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eugene. Next up, we have Ryan, I'm going to say Globus or Globus. Ryan, you got the mic.
Yes, thank you, Assemblymember Berman. So I'm on the VTA Citizens Advisory Committee, former constituent of yours. I moved out recently. Yeah, I just wanted to speak, I guess, narrowly to elections versus appointments or already elected officials. And I'm a little bit wary of adding another race to the ballot. There's already, every election, there's 10 plus ballot propositions. Everybody has to figure out how to properly regulate kidney dialysis. They have to figure out, okay, who to vote for a state controller and treasurer and secretary of state and all these offices. And I think as insiders, myself included, we love this stuff, we know this stuff, but I'll often get messages from friends and family being like, I have 15 things on the ballot. I have no idea how to vote for it. I have a job, I have kids, I have whatever else is going on in my life. They don't have the time, but they know they're more likely to know their mayor or a city council member or county supervisor. And so I think it'd be better either to have those elected officials given the resources to succeed or have them appoint people who can have the resources to succeed. So that's all I wanted to say. And thank you so much for hosting this event.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for participating. Next up, we're going to have Dennis Sullivan.
Am I on?
You are.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Assembly Member Berman. I appreciate very much this opportunity. I was one of the principal authors of the grand jury report a couple of years ago. And although I can't really expand on that, our rules preclude me from going beyond the four corners of our report. But it is very gratifying, I would say, that to see the attention that is being given to some of the issues that we raised. And I commend you and the others for your interest and focus on the subject. Having said that, I would just say one more thing about structures. It's a very complicated matter. We spent quite a bit of time on, and there's no perfect answer. Certainly we all agreed on that. But there are some interesting approaches out there. I think Austin, Texas, for example, is a very interesting approach that uses a hybrid structure between public officials and appointed non-politicians. And I would just commend that one to you to take a closer look at.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Dennis, and thank you for serving on the grand jury. I know that's a very time-consuming assignment in and of itself. Appreciate your willingness to do that. Next up, we have Gilroy Mayor Marie Blinkley.
Hi, thanks for doing this. Okay, I'm one of those members of the board who is from a small city, and I've been serving as an alternate since 2018. I share the seat with Morgan Hill, and whether or not small cities are effective has everything to do with the relationship between those cities. right, and the boards. I believe Gilroy and Morgan Hill have had an excellent relationship. Larry Carr, when he was on the board, on the city council, was our main board member, and I was the alternate, and we left it that way. We didn't switch it up because it was effective. And then when he didn't get reelected and I got elected mayor, I chose to leave it with Morgan Hill because I thought it was, so that's how Mayor Rich Constantine got on that seat. So our relationship does work. But I understand that for others, it doesn't. When you've got different motives and people wanting to be on for the wrong reasons, then transportation gets lost. So I'm here to say that my concern and my efforts since being on this since 2018 has all been about having the same level of service offered to the residents of Gilroy and Morgan Hill as is offered to the rest of the county. And that's where we have felt that we need to keep pushing, because our residents, of course, and we're over 100,000 people, pay the same sales taxes as everybody else. So I just don't know how to restructure the governance and still make sure that those of us who are not in the densely populated, touching each other cities can achieve that level of transportation. So I start to lean towards direct elections, to have to go on the VTA governance. I don't know. It's not just understanding transportation. It's making sure that the proportionate benefit is fairly distributed and not done in a way that is easier because other cities to the north of us are all bordering each other, and therefore, okay, I've made my point. I'll let others speak, but thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Mayor Blinkley, and thanks for the conversations we've had. Always appreciate your thoughts and perspective. Next up, we have Ian Griffiths.
Good evening. My name's Ian Griffiths, and I'm policy director for a regional organization called Seamless Bay Area that does a lot of work and advocacy on this topic region-wide. I am, full disclosure, not a resident of Santa Clara County, but I did want to make we have hundreds of supporters within Santa Clara County that supports governance reform. And I did want to offer, because we've done a lot of research in this area, some observations that may be worth considering as you take on this important issue, which I think is really critical to transportation within the county as well as region wide. I think a fundamental challenge with governance is figuring out what the right balance is between elected officials and experts. And I think you need both. You need elected officials to be involved for accountability, to the public, and you need, particularly with public transit agency and the type of organization that it is and the budgets, you do like expertise in a range of disciplines, and including, the rider experience, I would say as well. That's a component of expertise. Like both of those are really important, and it's figuring out how to achieve the balance and the between those things. So I think a mixed board with representative both is one way of accomplishing that. At BCDC is an interesting, I think, example of that in the Bay Area. It has a mixture of elected officials and experts. In BCDC's case, it's like coastal issues and a lot of the science that goes into this. But another model so I think that's worth considering. But another model would be like a two-tiered board, which is in use in Vancouver, Canada. And that's where you might have a mayor's council or some kind of political only board that meets less frequently at certain key points where, budget decisions, certain key elements. But then there's like an appointed board that's below that is making more of the operational day-to-day input on more operational decisions that maybe require that additional expertise. So encourage you to look at Vancouver, because it was really a model that was developed specifically to try to balance those two issues of accountability to the public and professional expertise. But in general, I support this effort and really think that it's the right approach to be convening stakeholders at this point, at this stage, to be identifying and fleshing out what the important issues are. So good luck.
Thank you, Ian. I appreciate that. And on that note, I want to ask Isabel LaSalle from my my team to add her email into the chat. And if people have, if anybody, you know, that you're not comfortable maybe giving public comment, or if you want to follow up on some of your public comment and send the suggestions that you made, please go ahead and email those to Isabel LaSalle on my team here in Sacramento. And next up, we've got Cupertino Mayor Darcy Paul. I said Cupertino Mayor and Vta board member Darcy Paul, excuse me.
Hi, Assembly Member. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. So here's what I have to say. Our elected officials are extremely capable people. And considering the compensation structures of serving as a local elected official in a municipality in Santa Clara County that is not San Jose, it is difficult to make the argument that representatives of small cities, of which I represent 5 of them on the VTA board, are people who are there for the wrong reasons. And so we have capable people who have sincere intentions. But where does that leave the rest of the system? I've been on the VTA board for a little bit less than a year and a half now. I am supportive of anything that makes for a better transit and transportation system here. But I wish 3 things were happening. First, I wish that we were having discussions about how to create a system-wide transit system that works for every part of our county. Second, I wish that we wouldn't have to face the prospect of spending large amounts of money later because we failed to plan for obvious administrative requirements earlier, like good connections between different modes of transit. Third, I wish that we were looking forward towards future and innovative modes of transit. Mark, I think I'm probably one of those people that you refer to as a friend. And I also hope that you're the genie that can deliver on these wishes. Thanks and best of luck.
There's a lot of pressure. Thank you, Darcy. Thank you, Mayor Paul. I appreciate that. Thanks for joining us tonight. Next up, we've got Mila Zelka. Mila, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Assemblymember Berman, and it's great to see John. Just a couple of notes. I'm partial to making sure that it is said that local perspectives are important, and we're hearing that from some of these local community leaders. And I include in that the importance of lay people participating in this, because many of the qualities that you described in the poll, including the one that no one checked off with the accounting piece, are really important skills that, you know, from a fiduciary duty perspective, is one that we need to have in addition to transportation skills. I want to share 2 things, 2 suggestions. One is that, so I wear one hat where I'm a resident of the county, but I also lead a nonprofit called Vta Workforce. And there we've been working with local employers of all sizes, including public school districts and Google and nonprofits like JobTrain. And these employers have been grouping together in sub-regional geographies. In particular, one that we're calling the Ravenswood subregion from Sunnyvale to Redwood City. It does cross the county line. So I don't know how much that particular geography might be of help in your discussion and exploration here, but I encourage you to look at the potential of sub-regional geographies to help maybe come up with new groupings that are based more around concentrations of population in employment centers. And that's where, you know, you have a lot of employers that are spread out in the smaller cities, and that there are people traveling to those places to work. And then the second piece was, you know, you and your staff would have more insight into this, but are there insights from what was the county transportation department before VTA existed. Is there institutional legacy? What worked well before VTA in this area that we might be able to glean some insight? And I say that, so I have the resident hat, I have the Manzanita Works hat, and I'm a former Santa Clara County Roads Commissioner. So when I was on that commission, it was interesting to see, you know, sort of what was the leftover in that department. And there might be some seeds there that might be of insight. Thank you for the opportunity and thanks for convening.
Thanks for the input and the suggestions, Mila. I appreciate it. Next up, we have Monica Mellon.
Hi, this is Monica Mellon. I'm a lifelong transit rider and I live in Cambrian and Santa Clara County. Been involved in VTA advocacy for the past 5 years or so, and I've attended most of the board meetings during the past 5 years and attended all of the governance reform ad hoc meetings a few years ago. And you know, I've personally had really positive experiences with the board members, especially, you know, during the pandemic when they really stood up for us and helped us to save transit. VTA gets a lot of hate, but they're actually the first major bus operator in the entire Bay Area to commit to full service restoration. And they're running the most service of any of those agencies right now. So they've really done a lot of good work. You know, back when I was participating in those ad hoc meetings, I was supporting governance reform, but over time I've realized that my issues are really about the lack of funding for operations to run more service. I think that the best thing that we can do to help current transit riders and to get more people onto transit is just to run more service. And that's not something that has anything to do with governance. If anything, the current board members are very supportive of that. And I really think that, you know, if there are funding opportunities, they would push for that. So really just want to encourage people to think about what the actual root of their issues are. I think that for most of us, it's actually funding and not governance. So please just really consider that. You know, I really want people to think for themselves and not just listen to all of the headlines and all of the hate that's being spread.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Monica, and agree 100% to not listen to the hate. So that Monica was our last person with their hand up. If there's anybody else who wants to throw a hand up, I know we had, I think John earlier, we had technical difficulties and couldn't get his mic working, or if there's anybody else, why don't we quick fives. And Penny, didn't you already speak? I think you already spoke. We're not going to do round twos, but Penny, don't hesitate to, you know, email us any additional thoughts that you have. I appreciate your passion though. Any other commenters? I think that's all we have. Well, let me get to there. And yeah, I think that's it. We don't have any more poll questions. One thing I do want to reiterate to folks, and Mila kind of alluded to this in regards to, on the poll question, you can just choose one kind of area of expertise. On the survey that we've created, I think you can choose your top 4. So we'd love for people to fill out the survey. The survey has some of the same questions from the poll questions, additional questions, and also kind of different variations on some of those questions. And, you know, really just want to get as much input as possible from folks who care so much about VTA that you're willing to spend an hour on your Wednesday night on a Zoom talking with me about VTA governance reform. So thank you to everybody who participated tonight. Thank you again to Vice Mayor Jones, Teresa O'Neill, John Courtney, for joining us as kind of initial speakers and panelists. Really appreciate everybody who spoke, and I've got a lot of notes taken. You know, this is an effort that's going to continue. Again, we're working on a proposal right now. We're going to take a lot of the feedback that we received tonight. And I hope everybody stays engaged. So thank you for your interest. Thank you again to the board members of VTA, to the staff of VTA, to the workforce of VTA. You know, so grateful to your dedication to helping Santa Clara County residents move around. And I'm sure hopefully we'll get a chance to talk soon. So with that, everyone stay safe. Have a good rest of your Wednesday evening. And I guess I should say, Vice Mayor, does anybody want to have any closing comments? Any of the panelists?
I just want to say thank you, Mark, for your leadership and your openness to hearing all different viewpoints and thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you. really appreciate you kind of going down this journey with me. So hopefully we'll end up at a good place.
Yeah, thanks
Teresa,
to all the, thanks to all the community members that care so deeply about this, and we, it's going to take all of us to find the path forward. Thank you, and thank you, Assemblymember Berman.
Thank you, Teresa.
And Isabel, who helped coordinate it.
And Isabel, who does 90% of the work, and I show up for the Zooms. So absolutely, Isabel LaSalle, my legislative aide, my former senior field representative in my district office, now my legislative aide here up in Sacramento, who's the staff point person for this effort, and is doing a Herculean amount of work behind the scenes. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.